I'm muted. Hello, welcome everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Danielle Barnes and I'm the CEO of Pretalk Design, and we are so excited to have you here for this morning's couch cushion conversation. So welcome, welcome. I'm thrilled to introduce our panelists, and I will tell you about them in just a bit. To give you some context on how this couch combo is going to work, we will have a conversation with our two panelists. You can ask questions throughout, so we'd love to hear from you. If you can put in the chat what questions you have for Paula and Ying. You can also use the Q&A feature if you prefer. I'll be checking those throughout the session, and we can incorporate your questions or we'll save them to the end. I also recommend that you follow along on social as well. So you can hashtag couch combo and tag us all. I will share all that in the chat as well. So again, very excited to get started and thank you for being here. So first I want to introduce Ying Liu, who is an award-winning artist, entrepreneur, educator, and bilingual speaker. She's won many awards from Fast Company, the Shorty Awards, and she's been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Bloomberg, Fast Company. She is well known for the Twitter fail well and the dumpling emoji, and has created all different types of arts and design and brands to really help unite people and bridge linguistic barriers. And she's spoken at South by Southwest, TEDx, Palo Alto, Adobe Max, Web Summit. Ying was born in Shanghai, China, and educated in Sydney, Australia, and the UK, and is currently based in San Francisco. Leveraging her cross-cultural background and experience, she strives to bridges between the East and West, and her life purpose is really unifying dualities between art and tech, business and culture, beauty and meaning, and work and life. So help me welcome Ying. Very excited to have you here.
Thank you, Danielle. Hi, everyone.
And next welcome. Next, we have Paola Marcelli, who's a multidisciplinary designer with 9 years of experience, currently working as a product design manager on Facebook's new product experimentation team. And while at Facebook, Paula has worked on Facebook Live, instant articles, Facebook videos for emerging markets, albums, and profile and music and more. Prior to Facebook, Paula worked on digital products at Groupon, Credit Suite, and Aditon. And she's received her master's degree in computer science from Harvard University, a bachelor's degree in information science and marketing from New York University, and certificates in business analytics and project management from George Washington University. Paula has also spoken all around the world, originally born and raised in Lima, Peru, and moved to the US when she was 15. She's now also based in California, and we're so excited to have her here. So thank you. Welcome, Paula.
Hi, welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. We are so excited to have you both here and to get us started. So today's conversation is about embracing your unique perspective. And I'm so excited to have both of you here because you have unique experiences in all of that you've done, but also a unique experience of being a bilingual speaker and speaking in both Spanish and English and Chinese and English. And we work with a lot of speakers at Pretalk Design who are bilingual speakers. Maybe English isn't their first language, and it can add to some additional fears and insecurities. Public speaking is already scary, and so I'm really thrilled to have you both here to share your own stories and experience and advice for those speakers. So let's get started. I'd love to hear first about how you got started in speaking. So what was your first experience? How did you get that speaking engagement? And Ying, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks, Danielle. My first speaking experience actually was kind of spontaneous and very organically. I got a LinkedIn invite from a person I've never met in Sydney, Australia. And they said, oh, I knew that you did the Twitter farewell. Would you like to be coming to the Ignite talk, which is a lightning talk for 5 minutes? And I was like, 5 minutes, that's easy. And I have something to share. It's about my design work. So that was my very first, now that I look back, it's 11 years ago. It's my very first experience facing more than 100 live audience. But I think for a lot of people, it really is, you have something truly you want to share and you're excited that the audience like wanted to hear from you. You have a voice. So that's my experience for the first time.
So what about you, Paula?
That's awesome. Sorry, Ying. Yeah, well, for me, before I attended NYU and Harvard, I attended actually my local community college where I got my associate's degree. And a few years after I graduated, they invited me to be their alumni commencement speaker. And so I really jumped in the deep end, as they say. And my very first public speaking engagement was to over 2,400 people. I had spoken to groups of people before because, you know, I had leadership roles on campus, but never really a very formalized speaking engagement. But I guess important context here is that in my personality, I love taking on new challenges and just, you know, jumping on the deep side of the pool, so to speak. And so I just did it. And after going through with it, I really fell in love with the process involved with it, of like introspection and really thinking through what it was that I wanted to share with people and how to communicate effectively and be succinct. And I really fell in love with that art and practice of conveying your thoughts in a way that resonates with an audience. And so I did more speaking once I was in the tech industry, and I fell in love not just with the process that originally attracted me to public speaking, but also with, as Ying mentioned, the fact that I wanted to share my experiences, one, and two, the fact that I didn't see many people like me. And so representation became a key driver for me and wanting to keep doing it.
Awesome. I'd love to hear how you figure out what it is that you want to speak about. I know that can hold people up a lot. And I know, you know, for Paula, when you're invited to give a commencement speech, you know, maybe that has the category for it. And Ying, like, you had a specific thing that they wanted to hear about. But in general, how do you start to think about what it is that you might want to speak about and share?
That's a great question. For me, after I did my very first public speaking engagement and I knew that I fell in love with it and I wanted to keep doing more, even when I didn't really have any events or anything coming up, nobody had booked me for anything, I kept a backlog of like, okay, these are all the different ideas that I have about the industry. These are all the ideas I have about design. These are different things that I would be able to provide out of my own experience, out of my own story that other people wouldn't be able to. And I just kept that, like as an ongoing list. And eventually when the opportunities presented themselves, I was ready for them because I had kept this sort of like book of ideas and potential topics of things that I wanted to share with people.
That was great, Paula. I kind of, in my case, I think it's similar to you doing design, right? There's a lot of passion projects. So similarly with speaking, I do a lot of passion speaking topics. I would do Q&A a lot of times after my session or gigs, and people will give me feedbacks and say, hey, I really want to hear about this. And because you mentioned about this, and what about this? And I'll be like, this is great. Well, let's test it out. And I would usually do this with a group of passionate people, kind of just like what Women Talk Design. It is amazing community. You do a lot of test runs with friends that you trust. And now that we have Zoom, it's easier to kind of just do a little small kind of group of people. Hey, are you interested in this topic? Would you like to join my test run? And it's always very helpful. And when you hear people actually, the audience especially, if the audience is truly interested and they have something to take away, it's really not about me as a speaker. It's about, you know, what do the audience get? So if you can provide something that audience truly wanted to hear about, this is always going to be a very good start.
Awesome. That's great. That's great advice. And I know that can be hard for people, is figuring out like, what is it that people care about, and getting that feedback, I think is such great advice. I'm curious if either of you have had any fears when it comes to public speaking, and how have you handled those? How have you addressed them?
Paula, you go first. I have a terrible story to share, but you should go first.
Oh God, I can't wait to hear it. Of course there were fears. I mean, it's terribly scary to put yourself out there for what you feel is judgment, right? Like it's I think a natural fear. And something that I try to do is similar to what Ying just mentioned, which is like just taking my ego out of it. And it's like, it's not about me, right? Like, people are not here because they love Paola. They're here because they're interested about the content. And
they do love you.
So, maybe you, that's good. but right, it's not really about me. It's about the content, and the people in the audience, or people that are tuning in on the webinar, and hopefully getting something useful out of it. And so just taking my ego out of it helped a lot. Another thing is that that I was fearful of was my accent, especially after the first couple of public speaking engagements. I realized that my accent is more pronounced when I'm doing public speaking versus when I'm in my regular life, which probably has to do with, you know, nerves and breath and energy and all of that. But I learned to just embrace it rather than be fearsome of it. It's just, you know, part of being so awesome that I speak more than one language, you know.
Yay! I would love to share my fear and failure story, because it's always so fun to look back, because this is happening back in 2005, which is almost 15 years ago. I didn't even know that was public speaking, because I volunteered to be a live translator for 5 university professors coming to Shanghai during my school holiday in the summer. And I did not know what I got myself into, because I really didn't have like a real, like a live translation experience, but it was facing probably more than 2,000 students over 5 days. Like each day they go to a different school. So on day one, you know, because I had lack of experience and I was super nervous. And so, you know, when the professor like speak for like 2 minutes, they look at me and I had no idea what's going on. I had so much fear after that failure. I wasn't even wanting to do the second day. But I think that because of that almost like massive fear and just a massive failure, it helped me to like rock bottom, like in very early age. So I remember my parents said, well, you're already rock bottom. The only thing you can do is going up. And I do think that the fear comes from, a lot of times I think fear comes from lack of experience. And also fear comes from wanting to preserve this perfect self. I don't want to break, you know, this perfect image of, you know, what I have. I want to stay safe, because I think once you kind of really push yourself doing this, you will see there's so much more potential. I think I remember on day 5, it's just like a complete different day. So I do think that a lot of times if you look at fear itself and started to look at, once you kind of try it and what's going to happen next and see like the potential result, it will help you to really kind of embrace it and break it.
That's great advice. I love that. I'm curious, Paula, you had mentioned your accent and having fears around it. And is that ever feedback that you got? I know that that's like oftentimes that people are afraid of getting that feedback and having others say it to them. Is it something that someone had said to you, or was it mostly in your head? And I'm curious seeing if that's ever come up for you as well.
It's definitely happened both ways. I mean, for one, I realized, you know, I watch recordings and it's like, oh my God, my accent is way more pronounced. But also got a feedback that is related to it, which was that I, especially early on in the earlier years, that I was too robotic when I was speaking. And that came across because I was actually not entirely confident of my language abilities in front of a big audience, or that my accent would get in the way of pronouncing certain words. And so I over prepared, if there can be such a thing. And so sometimes that could come out a little robotic. And for me, it was a lot about, okay, like how can I make it better? If that person has that feedback, you know, is that getting in the way of me delivering the message? And if so, like, let me fix it. And what kernel of truth there is in that message. So it's not so much that I'm being like robotic, but maybe I'm more prepared, and like maybe I need to be more confident in my language abilities. And it's, you know, it was just like how I handle feedback, right? And I actually just wrote a Medium post about handling feedback, so that's very much top of mind. And it's difficult sometimes, but just being able to analyze, like, okay, maybe the way that they give me the feedback is not great, but like, is there truth to it? And if it's getting in the way of me delivering the message, which is the entire goal of me speaking anywhere, then let me fix it. whether it's my accent or me being over prepared because of my language, being self-conscious about it.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Ying, what about you? Has that ever come up for you?
Oh yeah. There's so many. I loved one of my one of my speaking coach, actually, Cliff Kennedy. He gave me this wonderful advice, which is embrace your audience and knowing that they're investing their time and listening to you. Automatically, they already love you because they decided to do, instead of anything else, spending time listening to you. So honoring that and making sure that the feedback is coming from a place of improving for you. And I also have because I've done this for so many years, I started to really have a less of a self-doubt and really kind of started to embrace my own uniqueness, which is, yes, I am born in another country, and of course I'm gonna have a little bit different accent, and it's totally fine. And because I was born and raised in Asia, a lot of times the L and R sound is not very distinguishable, because in Asia, like the L and R sound, it's like people always say like, "Oh, you're such a workaholic," but I'm like, no, I'm not a workaholic. I'm a workaholic. But because I have L and R problem, I'll be like, I'm not a workaholic, I'm a workaholic. And people are like, what are you talking about? And so in the beginning, I'll be like, oh my God, I just pronounced it wrong. And over time, I was like, actually, I think somebody mentioned that, like, this is your English. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna use this. I'll be just telling people, look, this is my English. I have to own it. You know, you own your uniqueness. And I did some research just this morning, actually. English is 1,400 years old. Arabic and Chinese and a lot of Asian civilization, their language is like more than 3,000 years old. And so if you're speaking more than a language, like Spanish, it's also more than 1,000 years old. And so a lot of languages, they have a huge history. And so being able to speak 2 languages, that's like a combined of almost 4,000 years of history. Think about that. That's amazing. So I do think that it is important for you to honoring yourself first, and then also honoring your audience as well. And in this way, you will become more natural because you're coming from a place and intention of doing the best you can, and people will feel that.
I love that. What amazing advice. Thank you for sharing that. That's definitely inspirational. And on that note too, of, you know, the uniqueness and having this ability to speak, you know, both of these languages. I know both of you speak in both English and Spanish and Chinese respectively. And I'd love to hear more about that experience of what it's like to prepare for a talk in English versus Spanish or Chinese. Do you reuse your talks and translate them? Just anything about that experience that you can share for folks who are thinking about, you know, delivering a talk in not just English, but maybe in another language as well.
Yeah, for me, I've intended to use the same talk, but it usually ends up being a different talk at the end of it. It starts by changing, you know, the examples, making them more localized. And then at the very end, like, it's a completely different talk. I think it has a lot to do also with the difference between transcription and translation. And so transcription, it's the verbatim replication of words, so word per word, from one language to the other, versus translation, which is more about expressing the intent behind the words. And so you'll find a lot of that in like idioms, right? Like a bird in the bush is worth 2, or a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, right? And if I were to do a transcription word per word in Spanish, they would be like, what are you talking about? Why are there 2 birds in a tree or something, right? But if you translate it, like the intent of it, the meaning of it, then it actually means something. And then after doing a lot of that and thinking through how to deliver content in a way that will be received for that particular audience, it ends up being usually an entirely different talk. But that's okay, because that's part of the job of making sure that the message is received by that particular audience.
That was lovely, Paula. In my case, I think that because I do a lot of projects dealing with linguistic and graphic and shape and colors, often I found it's interesting to choose specific projects that is relevant and familiar with the audience. So in my case, when I go to, for example, China to speak, I would actually give a lot of examples that is resonate with the audience because they speak the language. Especially if I also, for example, showcasing like 404 pages with different graphic design. In terms of the Asian audience, I would actually use some examples that I found on the Asian tech company website. And if I go to Australia, I would actually pull in some of the Australian interface and show the Australian audiences because it's more relevant to their day-to-day life. The other thing is when you do, especially cross-cultural communication, even though I don't speak Hindi, I don't speak Korean language, but when I was doing a lot of projects, I work with local people. So I always have to like double check with my local team or even the event organizer, like, what do you think about this? So user testing, I definitely think it's very important to make sure that the audience will resonate with whatever new topic you want to add on.
Yeah, that's great advice, not just for speaking, in a different language, but speaking to different cultures too as you're traveling around. So I love that. I'm curious too, do you all have a preference of which language that you speak in? Or have you had, I guess on like a second follow-up to that, have you had a favorite place that you've spoken?
That's a hard question.
This was not one of the prepared questions, throwing it at them.
It's a hard question because every place is different people, right? And at the end, I mean, one of my favorite parts, which is not as easily replicated on virtual talks, is at the end of the talk, when people come and talk to you one-on-one and you're able to really delve deeper into their particular story and how what you're saying may or may not be able to help them, and hopefully do help them. And so like, for me, it's more about those favorite experiences with people that I've had versus a particular place. But to your earlier question in terms of the language, that one is really hard too, because, at different times, English and Spanish has each felt as my second language. And I know on paper, English will always be my second language because I was born and raised speaking Spanish, and, I have Peru in my blood. But ultimately I immigrated to a country that, speaks English, and English became my first language in a way. And so it actually sometimes takes a little bit more work for me to speak in Spanish, especially since I'm usually speaking about design, and I left Peru in high school. And so I don't have like a lot of the technical jargon or the right terminology in Spanish. So it takes a little bit more work to do that. But each of them come with their own rewards or personal satisfaction of being able to share it with an audience that I deeply, deeply care about. So yeah, those are tough questions.
That was awesome. For me, I think this is such a great question, and we didn't prepare for this, and I think it's great. What I love about it is being a speaker, it's such a privilege to be able to travel to around the world and being able to meet different people. And the more that I travel, the more that I found the similarities between people. And also, I was just constantly amazed by people around the world. I can think of two really great places. Again, I think that it's really the people that makes the place special. And one of them is in Freiburg, in this lovely university town in Germany. And I went there in 2018 with Smashing Magazine for the Smashing Conference. And it was a beautiful campus sort of environment, and everybody like from all parts of different world, and they're so excited. And I think that they don't necessarily have speakers like me in the middle of Germany, and doing sort of a cross-cultural talk. And I love the fact that, you know, when I'm in New York or San Francisco, I don't consider myself as a minority, even though, you know, there is, you know, not a large number of Asian American, but when I'm in Europe, I feel like, wow, people really feel like I have this voice that they have never heard. And that was really amazing when people give me feedback. They're like, this is so interesting and so fascinating. And we're really, we really found it's inspiring because we haven't heard anything like this before. But the other thing, which is kind of, to me, I think it's great. I have a very different voice that I could make a difference to people's life. But the other thing I found it's also amazing is this unity that from, again, an audience feedback in Toronto. This was back in 2000, I think it was 2018 as well, was also with Smashing Conference. And it was after the talk that I mentioned a little bit my process of making the dumpling, the chopstick, the fortune cookie, and the takeout box emojis. And I remember there was this Canadian Canadian Chinese guy came up to me and he said, "Thank you so much of what you did, because what you did is I don't know if you like aware, but what you did is really giving the voice of Asian communities around the world." And at that time, I feel like this kind of rush of connection, because, you know, it's so interesting. I was born in China, Shanghai, and I was able to do the work. Initially, I just want to send an emoji to my friend, but I was able to use the work I did, whether it's through design or through speaking, to connect with people on an emotional level. And that was beautiful. And that was just such a gift and a blessing. So that's basically my two favorite experiences.
I love that. Thank you, Ying. And do you have a preference in what language you speak in? Do you prefer to present in one language over another?
I really don't. I gotta be honest with you. I don't have a preference of the language I speak, simply because I think I feel comfortable speaking both of the language. It really is the audience. It's the energy of the audience that you also, because a lot of times I think even it's the same topic, maybe even in the same city, but it's like different audience have very different energy. They respond to you differently. Some of them, that I remember, like some people can be very, you know, that in a work environment, they're with their bosses and colleagues and they don't laugh that much. And then other times it's more relaxing and they laugh. And even it's at the same, you know, same venue, the energy would be so different because of people.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you brought up. Is that hard when you feel like you can't sense the way that the audience responds? I hear this a lot from especially new speakers being really nervous that, like, I'm going to make a joke and no one's going to laugh, or you know, there's this whole room of people and like I can't sense their excitement. And I'm curious how you've handled that, especially because, you know, depending on the context of where you're giving the talk, there might be a different energy or vibe.
Paula, would you like to
Definitely.
share?
I think when I speak in more colder countries, so Scandinavian countries, the audience tends to be a little bit colder too, versus if I speak in like Peru or Chile, and people are already, you know, shouting things out from the audience, and definitely it can feel like a different vibe. I think it's about it's on you a little bit to learn about the culture, so to feel a little bit more comfortable with those differences, but also the times that you are in the audience yourself, and you know, sometimes you are paying attention, but sometimes like you're tired, right? Like you've been at a conference all day, or sometimes something happened or whatever, and you don't feel like laughing out loud, or you don't feel like hollering all the time. And so just putting yourself in their shoes and just trying to do the best of like engaging people, and then taking polls afterwards as well, and asking people for feedback can be really powerful. Before and after, there's no reason why you can't, you know, engage one-on-one with people, which I find super valuable, and you get to learn a lot about the audience and where they're at as well. Also, it's really interesting if you are speaking like right before or right after lunch. That's always like a fun spot as well in terms of energy. So just being conscious of of your of the context in which you're speaking. It can be also very helpful to see like whether people are reacting to your message or to the fact that they're really hungry or like they just ate a bunch and they just want to take a nap.
Like, don't take it personally. I'm in the way of your food. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a great reminder. I love the reminder too of putting yourselves in the shoes of the audience, because I'm sure like all of us have been in an event where we've been, thinking about work that we had to do or feeling tired, like you said, and it doesn't mean we're not engaged. It's just we are human and we have other things on our mind that are going on. So that's a great reminder.
Yeah, that was amazing. I think that I would love to sort of add on after Paula is that no matter whether you're a new speaker or you're an experienced speaker, right now is the best time for you to practice, because right now everything is online and you don't get any response at all. It's so surreal. I gotta be honest with you. I think Paula would probably agree. It was such a privilege when you look back. You were able to travel, you were able to eat exotic food, and you're able to meet people from around the world to connect with you in person. But what I love about right now is, I think, seeing the silver lining is that this online speaking, this online communication is a new way of connecting with people. And it's also basically, whether you're an experienced speaker or you're a new speaker, this is ground zero, and you could really have a really wonderful start and testing things out. And for me personally, since COVID-19, I've been doing probably 6 different online events. Some of them are a bigger audience with 1,000 people. Some of them are probably just like 50 people. Like yesterday, we did a emoji like just a spontaneous emoji presentation session. And within 24 hours, we had more than 50 people showed up. But when I'm presenting, whether it's towards 1,000 people or 50 people, or maybe like 2 people, you can't see the audience because everybody is muted and you're just like clicking on the slide. I remember when I was doing this 8x8 with China Accelerator, they had like audiences tuning in from around the world. And it was 4 a.m. I'm like sitting in front of a computer. I knew there was all these people cheering for me, but I cannot see them. I cannot hear them. I can feel them. I think in some way you can't even look at the chat box because you have to concentrate, on your presentation. So you have absolute zero interaction or response. So how do you go around and sort of thinking? I think in the mental energy is very important. And sort of your intention, again, if you look at all the YouTubers, a lot of times they kind of they pre-record their content, but they knew that they have something will provide people value. And so this exercise is actually quite, I think, amazing for you, especially as a new speaker, is imagine success. Imagine people are cheering for you. Imagine that you're actually in front of like not even hundreds, probably millions of people waiting for your message or the thing that you wanted to give to them. And that will make, it will just make you so pumped up, and things will, like information and content will naturally come out.
I love that. That's great advice. I know that a lot of even really experienced speakers like now, like you're saying, are having a hard time not being able to see their audience. And so for those new speakers, this is, an advantage you can have of not relying on the audience excitement to pump yourself up. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to give another plug too. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A feature that you can drop them in there. We will answer them. So we'd love to hear what questions you came with today. And I have a couple more that I will ask our speakers. And so one of the things that I'm curious too about, and you spoke to this a bit when you were talking about feedback early on, but I'd love to hear how your speaking has evolved over time. So from that initial short talk, Ignite talk that you gave, and from that commencement speech, how have you evolved as a speaker?
Hola.
Sure. I hope that I'm not as robotic as I used to be. So I think overarching theme is just being more comfortable in my own skin in general, as a person and as a professional. And so that has to do a lot with a lot of different things. One being, the language and the accent, speaking in English and speaking in Spanish. I'm just more comfortable with those things. And secondly, it's just the experience of having it done over and over again, of being more comfortable speaking to large groups of people or smaller groups of people. And having that practice really helps you like hone in on the message and trying to craft it for that audience. And so when something happens, like you have a stronger accent than you are used to hearing yourself, then you know that you've done the best to craft the best message possible, and your accent is not really impeding an impediment to that. And so you're more comfortable, and if people have any issues with the accent because of the accent in and out of itself, then those things just like, don't really bother you anymore, don't really bother me anymore. And so I think it's been a growth, both in terms of the public speaking itself, but also personally as well, just being more comfortable with who I am and what I have to offer.
That's beautiful. I think that in my case, it's interesting to kind of realize over the last more than 10 years now, I initially was starting from that 5-minute talk about my design, which is more sort of graphic orientated. But what I found that was interesting is as time goes by, I'm not only just talking about one like design project I did, it's more about the methodology behind it. So I think that the audience always give me the best feedbacks of what next topics I needed to give to other people, because they want to hear, okay, it's great to hear your process, but is there any sort of design thinking methodology behind it you can also share? And it's great because it forced myself to look at and started to look at the pattern of the work I do and extract what's the essence of the sort of thinking ideology behind the work, and then I can share that together with some examples. And also the topic started to evolve from design to cross-cultural design, because I realized, oh wow, the work that I did in the last 10 years are very different countries with different languages. And what also was interesting is along the way, there's more topics kind of becoming popular. Like people are like, oh, we wanted to know more about emoji. We wanted to know more about, how did you do things specifically for Australian audiences? And I think that there is this sort of larger topic. You can also have like, it's almost like macroscope and microscope. So you will have a more international and more unified topic that you can share with everybody, but you can also have a more niche topic. In this case, I think it's also really amazing. What we're doing right now is essentially, becoming a new topic, because I have been speaking about design, but I've never actually did a thing that's speaking about speaking.
Very meta.
It's so meta. I think, again, being a designer is just such a wonderful opportunity, because you do the work and later on you will go and you talk about your work, and then you go and you talk about how you talk. So it's, in a way, I think we're able to do the work and do the research, and we're constantly learning, because every single time we give a talk to others, we learn more about what we did, and you really become better at it, because people are going to ask you questions and you have to explain to them. And often through these questions, you will find out, oh my God, I have a lot of blind spot. I didn't think about this. I didn't think about that. And audience will give you some of the best learning opportunity, which would actually help you to find better topics, or even more inclusive topics. But by the end of the day, it is, again, you are gonna find like how you can better help the community, basically. So that's kind of my experience.
That's great.
That's so very true, Ying. And something that you said reminded me, another thing that I've learned is that earlier on, when I first started speaking, for me, it was like, all about the content, and I went to the extreme where it was like, people don't want to hear about me at all. Let me just share all about the content. And something that I learned is to do share about myself and about my story, and to not forget to share that part and be vulnerable about it, because it can help actually send the message or deliver the message in a more compelling way. That's something that I also had to learn, because at the beginning I thought like nobody wants to hear about anything that has to do with me or any of my examples, but actually that's what makes a talk more interesting most of the time.
Absolutely, Paula. This is something I found. It's again, this reminded me of a quote, which is one of my favorite quote by the Canadian wonderful thinker Marshall McLuhan. Said, "The medium is the message." So as a presenter, as a speaker, you are the medium. Yes, it is about the message itself, but you're also the message, because you're the vessel to deliver the message to the audience. You're the embodiment of the person who's speaking the message to others. And so, like I said before, when Paula said, it's not about me. Yes, it is. Sometimes it is about the content, but it's also about you. And people will love content because they love you, because you're the person that carries the content, and you're the person that is the messenger. So make sure that you really kind of fully embrace yourself as the messenger, and knowing that you have a unique voice and your audience love you, then you will become the best messenger you can be.
I love it. Such great advice. Thank you both so much. We have a question in the Q&A that I wanted to bring up, and it's about practicing. So I know that I think you had mentioned some, like the lightning talks that Women Talk Design does, and a speaking coach, but this person asked, what are some ways to practice public speaking, like online community or coaching or Toastmasters? What would you recommend?
Deadlines. Like, seriously, have deadlines. Sign up for things. I love doing this with Paula and Danielle, because we had a deadline. And it's also talking to Danielle, and we prepare in advance. We had a prep call. Danielle sent some of the questions. Some of them, they're new today, but it's great.
Throw them out there.
I love it. But I definitely think that having the audience and practice with real audience. You can do it in front of your computer, but it can be very boring. In my case, for example, I just did another Ignite after 11 years. I did another Ignite on Cinco de Mayo, and I remember that I did the first one, and it was kind of a disastrous, because I kind of just like well, I will win it, because I always win it. In the past, I don't do a lot of practice. I kind of just get onto the stage, and when the live audience is there, you feed their energy, and things just kind of flow. But it's a complete different monster for online speaking. To be honest, you have to sort of spend some time. What I would actually recommend you, if you do online speaking prep, it's definitely going to benefit your offline speaking for sure. Is you use the Google slide or use a Keynote, but I think Google slide is great because you can share that on the cloud. And then maybe you have a few friends, or join the Women Talk Design Lightning Talking groups, and just sharing with your intimate small group, because people are not going to judge you. They all want to better themselves. And then have people giving you feedback. Please have people giving you feedback, and do it more regularly. Do it once a week, at least doing it once a month. And after 3-4 months, you will see the result. I can promise you it's going to make a huge difference.
That's great feedback. Other pieces of feedback for before you are ready to speak in front of people that you can practice as well, that I found helpful, is just practice with like your slides up or your presentation up on presentation mode. Record yourself and see how you're speaking instead of the text that you have, and try to improve upon those. Another helpful tip for me has been writing it down. Write down what you would say, and sometimes reading the entire transcription of what you would say, you realize, oh my gosh, this doesn't make sense, or I should be moving this thing that I said at the end or the beginning. And sometimes it takes you either hearing yourself speak by recording it or reading what you were going to say to realize, okay, there's a lot of things that I could change or things that I could move around. And then just like echoing what Ying said, just like practicing, a lot of practice, and Women Talk Design is definitely a great place for that.
Oh yeah, this is just reminded me, Paula. I would also recommend a application. You should totally try it out. It's called Otter.ai. So Otter as in like the sea otter, and .ai. It is a wonderful transcription app that allows you. They give you, I think, 600 minutes for free, and the premium is actually not that expensive. And what it does, which I found it's very helpful for me. And full disclosure, I don't represent the company. I just found it's very useful. So far, I've been using it to record my practices so that it transcribes in real time. I can go back and look at the timestamp and realizing, okay, this part I do very well. Oh, this part I can improve. And you can also export your entire speech. So if you said something really like truly inspiring during your little rumbling time, and you're like, oh my God, I can use it for my next talk. And so this is always very helpful. I think that, when you really get into the zone of presenting to people, making sure have a recording of that and transcription of that, it's always helpful for you to go back and refine it.
That's great. Thank you both. We have another question in the Q&A about what you do right before your talk. So do you have any pre-talk rituals to calm and center yourself before you actually start speaking?
Power poses. Which but those are actually really helpful. Power poses, just to get you in the right like mind frame of like, okay, I'm powerful, I'm strong, and like right now I'm going to share a message that I believe in, and get in the right mindset. So some of that is like and breathing as well, right? So a lot of those things are whatever psychological things you need to do or routines you need to do to get you in the right mindset is one. And two, it's more practical for me. It's just triple checking that I have, a million backups to all the backups and cables and internet and headphones and water, it can be very important.
Absolutely, yes. And also for people who are speaking online now, this is my tip. Before you start your talk, make sure you restart your computer just in case anything happens. For my sort of ritual is I always have this breathing exercise, which is very simple to do. When you get onto the stage, breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then breathe out. And if you can practice this for 4 rounds, I think it will really calm your mind. The other tip I would love to share is from my wonderful speaking coach, Cliff, give me these 10 different points before you get onto the stage. Number 1 is remember your purpose. Number 2, visualize success. Number 3, embrace your audience. Number 4, review your conclusion. Number 5, know what to say first. And then number 6, balance your stance. So in this case, if you're at home sitting in whatever pose you like, I'm actually sitting like right now, I have my feet up on the chair. It's actually very relaxing. You can't see it, but it's actually really great. I can do like a little Buddha pose the whole day, and it feels great. And then number 7, which is set your tempo. So a lot of times when we speak, we go very fast. And when you try, there's also another app, which is a free app that help you to set your tempo. So when you talk, there's a little sort of timing thing, so you can kind of feel the rhythm you talk. And number 9 is smile. And number 10 is be thankful.
Those are great.
Oh, Those are great. Thank you so much for sharing those. And thank you, Cliff. We have one more question in the chat, and then we'll start to wrap things up because I want to make sure everyone can get out in time. This question is about getting paid to speak. So do you get paid when you speak? Have you ever faced any awkward conversations around getting paid to speak?
I can answer first in that it's kind of fast because I don't in a way. I speak, I'm a representative of Facebook as a Facebook employee, and we're not allowed to take any sort of monetary compensation. But something that I've done is I do, and we're doing now with Women Talk Design, which is like any sort of compensation I donate to charity, and I'm able to choose like what charity I want to donate to. And so for a little while, I've been donated to the American Cancer Society, which has affected my family. And so that's one way to get around it. If you also work at a big company that won't allow you to take any monetary compensation. But another thing that it's not necessarily one-to-one compensation, but you know, flights when these things are available and make sense. Flights, hotel accommodations, meal reimbursements, you can also consider those as part of like a compensation package and be able to like negotiate those items as well.
I don't work for Facebook, but I can speak for, you know, I can speak for individual speakers, especially professional speakers, is you know, having this as their part of their you know, life. And I appreciate that Paula has this corporate background, and I do think that it's wonderful for corporates to really empower their employees to become like a better speaker, and also giving opportunities for other industry leaders to come over and give education to their employee. So I have been very fortunate to be able to do this quite naturally, because in the beginning, when I do, for example, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when I do Ignite Talk and when I do a lot of smaller talks in the beginning, I didn't consider about, really, I didn't consider about the compensation itself. To me, I think it's almost like you're giving an opportunity to learn, to become a better speaker. It's a new skill, but it's the same thing as you go to university. You have to graduate. And once you have to get onto the market, and I'm running my own studio, and I've been running my own studio for the last 12 years. And one thing, I think it is a very awkward position. It's like when you graduate from school, you're like, oh my God, I'm in a job market. I have to also price myself. What am I gonna do? But knowing that the experience you have when you're doing free work or you're doing free speaking gigs is part of the learning process. And you have to graduate yourself, and you have to start it to pricing yourself, because you provide value to others. This is the only way you can be a better person and also a better speaker, if you can make your career sustainable. So when the time is right, people are going to start to ask you, how much do you charge? Actually, when that time comes in, started to give yourself some ownership and say, I did a good job. People think they can pay me now, right? And that's also one thing you can started to say to yourself, I actually really provide a lot of value, and I should started to charge. If I'm not working for a larger company and they pay my expenses and all that, I have to figure out a way to make this sustainable as a business. And it's only fair. It's like, you know, artists and musicians, it's the same thing. I think a lot of times artists and musicians, they give a lot to the society, but we also need to value ourselves and put a number on it. So I definitely think that in terms of like pricing, and once you started, people started to ask you, talk to industry people. Happy to like for you to reach out to me, and I can also share some more experiences later on. Maybe we can do a pricing session.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's great. And we actually, our last couch combo, the whole theme was getting paid to speak. So we're working on a write-up on that now that we'll make live on our site. So there's definitely some good insights there. And since we are at time, I just want to wrap things up and say thank you so much to Paula and Ying. This has been so great. You all are so inspiring. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your stories and expertise. Thank you to those who joined tuned in. We're doing another session this afternoon, evening, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So if you know anyone who might benefit from this conversation, please send them the link. And we hope to see you start speaking and sharing your voice and experiences. And again, thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.